Joining us now is Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director at the Henry Jackson Society. Thank you, Dr. Mendoza. Alan, welcome to the show. Let me ask you what you feel about all of this. I mean, COBRA are meeting now with a view to tightening up our anti-terrorism laws. The police, with their new strange hobby, are requesting clarity on the breaking of laws. If you've got someone climbing up a statue and maybe perhaps defacing it with spray paint, I don't understand why the police want clarity on these laws. If you have a crowd of anti-Israel protesters shouting and screaming jihad, funnily enough, for random reasons, I happen to have been caught up in both of the pro-Palestinian marches last Saturday and this, and it's a cacophony of jihad, jihad. The police apparently require clarification on this language used. If you're calling for jihad, a holy war against Israel, that's a call for violence, that's against the law. Why is it, Alan, now do you feel that the police suddenly, when confronted with law breaking in these circumstances, require clarity? Why don't they just arrest people?
Well, I suspect, Kev, that the reason this is happening is because, frankly, the police are intimidated by the size of the marches. And there's 100,000 people on the streets, and they're worried, I think, about going in there and sorting people out. And you only have to look at pictures, for example, of how our police are policing these events compared to, say, Germany. In Germany, you've got people, the police are properly equipped. They look the part. They look like you don't want to mess with them. Our police, if you saw the bits you showed on screen, they looked like, well, on a tough day or even an easy day, we might be able to take them if we're a mob. So part of this reflects, I think, just the police need to have a mindset change, recognise that serial law breaking is happening at these marches, and start equipping themselves to a point where it looks like they mean business, and that may well have a role in actually limiting what the protesters actually do in terms of breaking the law. Until that point, we're always going to have this battle because the police will always seek clarity as opposed to trying to actually take advantage of what the law currently provides, which clearly they could do yesterday, or on Saturday, seeing as they did arrest 7 people. They probably could have arrested more. And I think it's sort of really incumbent on the police to make the most of their powers rather than the least.
Before Alex gets in there, Alan, I would say, as I say, I was there. First of all, I don't know what the numbers are, but from an observational point of view, the police presence was, to say the least, light. And secondly, I would say, I estimated last week, I've got some experience of demonstrations. I've reported on them all over the world. I've got a bit of a radar, and I said to my wife last week when we got caught up in last Saturday's march, this is 100,000, and I was right. This week on Saturday, I estimated 150,000. I think there were many more. Now think about that: 100 to 150,000 marchers. A lot of them chanting jihad. 7 arrests. Not many, is it?
It's not. I mean, Alan, what I want to pick up on actually is a speech made by Robin Simcox. He used to, I believe, work at Henry Jackson Society. Now the government's extremism czar. He was making a speech at Rusi warning about Iranian infiltration into these pro-Palestinian protests, and 15 arrests for kidnap, murder on orders issued by Tehran in the last year, reported by the Met Police. We still don't prescribe the Islamic Revolutionary Guard of Iran. I mean, how big is the threat to essentially a fifth column existing within the UK who will act at the whims of some of these hostile regimes?
Well, it's clearly a problem, and you've just highlighted it by the number of plots and arrests that have taken place. The reality is that there is a foreign country operating within our borders that seeks to subvert what we are trying to do domestically and internationally, and can seemingly call upon endless operatives to carry out its wishes. I would suggest that's quite a serious problem for the UK, and why we are not prescribing the IRGC, as you've suggested at this point in time, seems baffling to say the least. We know Iran's been heavily connected to the Hamas atrocities. We know Iran is playing a major role in destabilizing the region and trying to bring Hezbollah into the war. We know Iran, because of the stats you've given, is operating on British soil. So why don't we act against Iran? I really don't understand why ministers are what they're waiting for right now.
This is the point, Alan. Again, I don't want to labour this too much, but I was there 2 weeks in a row. And my question, and I think what we as a nation have to ask ourselves, what exactly are these huge pro-Palestinian demonstrations about? What are they? Now, they're pro-Palestine. That's perfectly all right in a democracy. You can be pro whatever you like within reason. You can actually be pro-Israel, but nobody seems to be that, with the possible exception of us here and others. But what I discerned was that, yes, these are pro-Palestine. A lot of them calling for jihad, a lot of them calling for the end of Israel. But I also detected that these people, tens and tens of thousands of them, they're British, but they don't like Britain. This is an anti-British march. Not everyone, of course, but what I witnessed was an event infused with a hatred of their own country. And therein lies our problem, and therein lies the reason I think the police have got to start making a stand, rather than just standing by benignly and letting this happen. I understand what you're saying, Alan. If they stepped in and, caused trouble, it could really turn into something very nasty. But just to blithely let the law be broken in a way that I think was pretty anti-British, that's not the police's job. Their job is to stop this sort of anti-Britishness.
Oh, Kev, don't think for a moment I agree with what the police have done. As I stated, I think they should be using their powers to the maximum now rather than to the minimum, which is what they're currently doing. But yes, you're quite right. Look, these marches, they're not an Israel problem. They're not even a British-Jewish problem. They're a British problem. It is a British problem if tens of thousands of British citizens come out week after week chanting for violence, chanting for military action in a third-party sense against others, in some cases, of course, being openly anti-Semitic. This is a British problem. It is a British values problem. It is a British social cohesion problem. And it is a problem for the British state that it is ceding control of its streets to this kind of rhetoric, anti-British rhetoric, week after week after week, and doing nothing about it. This is not a tenable situation, and most people in the country regard this sort of thing. Again, you're right to mention it's fine to protest peacefully for a subject, but this is not, I wouldn't say shouting violent slogans, shouting incitement to violence is a peaceful protest. And the police and others need to get a grip, because if they don't, we're going to see week on week increased violence.
I mean, the government have had to call an emergency COBRA meeting today to talk about the increased risk of terrorism. The last time I think that we were really talking about this in media was during the rise of ISIS and during intervention in Syria. Did terrorism go anywhere? What are the government going to be briefed on today? What does the picture look like out there?
Well, here's the thing, you see, terrorism hasn't gone anywhere. The reality is that, as has been spoken about by people like Robin Simcox, by people like William Shawcross, for years we have pretended that this sort of Islamist radicalisation no longer is a problem, that somehow it was a problem 10 years ago, 5 years ago, but it's no longer a problem. And then something like this happens on our streets, and it reminds us it's alive, it's seemingly well, it's growing, and the government needs to urgently adopt many of the measures called for in the last 10 years to stop this kind of extremism from taking root yet further. If we don't do it, we are going to end up in a situation where in 5 or 10 years' time, the situation will be even worse than today. So, it really is necessary for government to get a grip on extremism right now and look at how it can fight it going forward.
Measures such as what? What is it the government should be doing? I mean, people out there are very concerned about the levels of mass immigration into this country. When we're having irregulated, illegal immigration across the Channel, for instance, people coming from such conflict zones, we don't know if we're getting the persecutor or the persecuted. What does the government need to do to contain this threat?
Well, Alex, you're right to highlight migration, but it's not just illegal immigration that's the problem here. One of the, I think, unintended effects of Brexit was not actually to cut our legal migration at all, but to change the sorts of people coming to our country. And now you're seeing a lot of extra-European migration legally into the country who replaced Europeans. So, that's significant, and that has an impact already in terms of understanding if we can integrate such large numbers of people at once. The hope is obviously you can, but if the government, again, fails to implement some measures, and to talk about the measures, look at what's been proposed over the last 10 years. You had the Casey review in 2016. You had the Khan review, the Syra-Khan review of 2019. You've had the Shawcross Prevent review. There are numerous reviews that tell you exactly what you should be doing. The problem is the government has yet to implement them. We need this done on steroids now.